Hey everyone, today I was just going to do a Warzone troubleshooting video for people running lower end setups. As you know, I'm running an RX 5700 normally at ultra wide 3440 by 1440. And what prompted me to do this video is I saw someone with an RX 570 4 gig card having stutter and performance issues, and he listed his specs. He listed, he has a Ryzen 1600, which this game should run fine on a 4-core CPU. So 1600 is plenty. He had dual channel RAM, 2x4 gig, which is on the lower side. Like, it's not the average, but it shouldn't be running the game at 40 FPS, right? And it shouldn't be stuttering at the very least. So with those specs, I would still expect around 100 FPS on very low 1080p. But given my own experience with the game and trying to run at ultra wide, I had this issue where I was hitting my VRAM stutter cap, which is something that I've just called, like, it's just a symptom of higher VRAM usage that I call it. Basically, once you hit a certain amount of VRAM usage based on your graphics card, and the game has to load its files and textures, whatever it's loading, it'll start a periodic stutter where the GPU is just constantly swapping what it needs and it can't get everything to fit. So the reason I know it's an issue with the GPU and the drivers, not specific. Well, it is an issue with the games that use, because the game's using a high amount of VRAM, but it's not really at fault of the drivers themselves. I think maybe they could smooth it out in the drivers, but it's just the fact that the game uses a lot of VRAM at the settings you're trying to run. So basically, if I set my game to normal, I've set it to 1080p. This is just for the test that I'm going to show you guys. If I set everything to 3440 by 1440 ultra wide, all I got to do is turn texture resolution to normal, anisotropic to high, and filmic, which smooths out, makes the game look really good, filmic to T2X. And that will push my VRAM usage past 7.5 gig as I play. So it's not going to stutter straight away. It'll start to stutter maybe after one match or halfway through the first match. It'll just eventually start if I set the settings too high. So that's why I run normal and not high textures. If I set high textures, I can almost guarantee that I'll get the stutter in the first match that I play. So I usually stick to normal. And you can see this big VRAM usage jump going from very low. That's kind of like, okay, that's not much. And then boom, big jump to normal. And then another massive jump to high. So, but don't look at this as a definite indicator. Although it's looking more accurate now. That's a bit weird. So I've got it at 1080p, and what I've done is I've turned the render resolution down just to demonstrate this bug. If I turn it back up to 1080p, and I turn the texture resolution up, so 3480 by turning it down doesn't even make that much of a difference, as you can see there. So I'll keep it at 100 then, because you're not going to want to turn your render resolution to 50 anyway. So basically, with my setup, it was pushing 7.4 gig. I'd get the periodic stutter. Exactly the same thing happened in Gears 5. And the way to fix it in Gears 5 was to lower my VRAM usage by lowering settings. So once I lowered the texture resolution, I think I had the ultra texture pack installed for Gears 5. Once I uninstalled that pack or reinstalled the whole game to get rid of that pack, the stutter disappeared. So obviously you might be thinking, well, I game at 1080p, I'm trying to play it low. What does VRAM usage have to do? The VRAM usage is low anyway. It's under 4 gig. I'm using a 4 gig VRAM card, whatever. So I've got this at 1080p, and you can see here this estimate, 1.4 gig. This estimate is the estimate VRAM usage at the menu. Okay, and when you load into the game, it loads more files. The estimate doesn't really change much. So as you can see here, I've got it on 1080p. I've set everything. I've got on very low textures, which is like not even near 2 gig. Okay, and I'm gonna load up my OSD to show everyone why some people are having stutter and others aren't. So you can see here, the VRAM usage is already at 4 gig. Okay, I think I play. Oh no, I actually restarted the game between matches, but the VRAM usage, it's loaded stuff from the game. It's remained high. My DDR4 usage, which is my system memory, is at 10 gig. Okay, so normally Windows will actually cache and use a bit more RAM when the RAM's available. If you're on 8 gig, your Windows is probably running fine. Your computer's probably going to run fine. If I go into hardware monitor, I can see that the minimum usage I was at was actually at 8 gig. But there's a good chance that if you're running 8 gig system memory Windows could possibly be using close to 8 gig. It could be like around 6 gig, 5 to 6 gig system memory usage. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through this. So your Windows might be using 5 to 6 gig. You can actually, it caches a certain amount, so you can actually control, delete, go to Task Manager, and you can look at how much it's caching here. Cached. Like you can see how whatever it's using in use, 10 gig. But you can get a rough idea. So just pretend you've got 8 gig. Let's just pretend. Say we're using 5 gig of that. That gives us 3 gig spare. Or if we're using 6 or 7 gig because we're running some background applications, maybe we're at 6 gig. So we're still in the clear, you know. As long as the game doesn't use a ton of memory because it's using VRAM, right? So just keep that in mind. And then I'm gonna load into a game and show you the VRAM usage, the actual VRAM usage. So apply, just load into Plunder. Although this estimate is, I mean, the actual usage you can see here is already off from the estimate in the menu. And I can also verify that the usage is pretty high by going into GPU-Z. So this GPU-Z is also showing 4 gig VRAM usage on very low, and it's using 1.2 gig system memory. So if you're on 8, if you've got 6 gig free or 7 gig, 7 gig used of your system memory, 1.2 gig for the GPU in the game or more, because the game might be smart enough to load some of these files if it's filling up the VRAM. Sometimes if the GPU is going to be overloaded, it'll just put all those files into your system RAM. But the fact is that the total amount you can see used here by the game is 6.5 gigabytes. So if you've got a 4 gig VRAM card, 4 gig for the game, and then another 2.5 gig is going to be loaded into your system RAM. So if you've got 8 gig system RAM, which you think is fine because you're running low settings and it shouldn't be using much VRAM or much texture memory, it's actually going to use a lot more than you think. It's going to be maxing out your VRAM and putting another 2 gig or so into your system RAM, which might cap out your system RAM. So it's not just the fact that your VRAM's not enough, it's the fact that your 8 gig system RAM, even if it's in dual channel, is not enough total capacity. So now that we've loaded into a game, you can see here, it's still hovering around 4 gig. This is just in the lobby. It'll probably get a little bit higher when I start playing, but this is very low, guys. Very low. It's not on normal or low. It's on very low, which is crazy. So yeah, you can see it's hovering around 4.2 gig. So at the very least, 158 MB is going to be going into your system memory to avoid the VRAM cap, the VRAM limit of a 4 gig GPU. At the worst, it's not going to load it properly, and it's just going to keep trying to swap files, and that's going to cause a constant stutter, which some people are having. So it's going to constantly try to load that extra 150 whatever MB between your GPU and your system memory, and your system memory might be capped out too. So put 2 and 2 together, you're going to have constant stutter. And so this isn't really a fix. This is an explanation for what some people are experiencing with it. You know, they've got 8 gig, and then people have told them 8 gig's fine. You know, games can still run good on 8 gig. Maybe not all games, or all of the newest games with big maps like this, with dynamic loading and streaming while you're trying to play. Oh, that guy's gonna shoot me. But yeah, you can see. Look at the VRAM now. It's gone up to 4.7 gig. After I've loaded into a proper match. So let's take a look at that estimate again. The estimate is 1.5 gig, which hasn't changed, and my games use, even for me, like just pretend that I'm using an 8 gig VRAM card, not pretend, I'm using 8 gig VRAM card, and I want to know my VRAM usage estimate, 1.5 gig, and the game's using 4.7 gig. So it's already off, regardless of how well it's managing the texture swapping or the file swapping. Obviously, it's running fine on my system. The frame time here is perfect. But if I happen to be running at high resolution and this was higher, then I'll get this periodic massive frame time spike, which is just like a vertical line that goes up like this. And it goes up about this high, and it's enough to, the FPS drops to like 40. And it's a very noticeable, like, sudden pause. What's this guy sneaking up finding me? sudden pause every 5 seconds while I'm playing, and it's basically unplayable. I have to restart my game and clear the VRAM and lower the texture resolution back down to normal, because I was trying to play it high at first because I was using this inaccurate, like it was telling me I should have had 4 gig VRAM usage, and I was using over 7 gig at ultra wide 3440 by 1440. So you can see there's some spikes there when stuff's loading. That's normal. So after giving you guys that explanation, hopefully you know what the problem is now. The solution is either they've got to patch the memory usage and optimize it further, or you get another 8 gig. If you're limited, like you can't upgrade your GPU, buying a second kit of RAM, if you're running 2x4 or if you're running 1x8, get another 8 gig stick. That will definitely help, because you don't want to be capping out your system memory when your VRAM usage is high. You need spare system memory to get those. Roughly 750 MB has to go to your system memory, and that's provided the game knows what it's doing. Because if I try to load this here, wait, GPU-Z's like crashed on me. If I reload GPU-Z, sorry guys, to get an accurate reading, you can actually see it's using at least 6.3 gigabytes. And if I max it, I don't know if, because I'm running the game different to my native desktop res. Let's try alt tabbing. Let it see what it's doing a bit. So yeah, if my 8 gig VRAM card is using 5 gig in the VRAM memory, my 8 gig RAM card, and 1.3 gig is in system memory, just imagine if you have 4 gig VRAM, that extra gig here, this extra 5000, that extra 1 gig is going to be in your system memory. So it's going to actually be using around 2.3 gigabytes of system memory to avoid texture swapping, and that's if it can avoid it. If there's essential files in that 5 gig here, then that's going to cause constant texture swapping between your system RAM and your GPU. And depending on how fast or how frequently it's doing it while you play, that's how bad the start is going to be. So yeah, and you can see here my actual system. You can see my DDR4 RAM usage in game. That's including what Windows is cached though, which isn't ideal. Like normally it'll be lower. If you've got 8 gig VRAM, Windows will limit how much it caches. So it's not going to just eat up your entire 8 gig VRAM system RAM, right? But you still might be close to 2 gig free. You might only have 1 gig RAM free for the game, and that's not going to be enough because it's using a ton of memory. So yeah, and I guess what I can do now, just to demonstrate for you guys, is I'm going to crank settings to push this VRAM usage even higher, which I know I can do, and I'm just going to change this to just 1440p, something realistic, not even ultra wide, just 1440p, and I'm cranking this up just to show you what texture swapping stutter looks like. Okay, so my estimate here is still only 3.7 gig. That's not even bad. Maybe we'll just stick to normal. Keep those high, because everyone says most guides will say max textures. It makes the game look good. It's fine, but when you don't expect the game's going to be using a ton of VRAM, you can easily surpass this your VRAM usage. Okay, so we'll load into another map. 1440p high. Okay. You can already stop watching though. If you wanted the explanation, that was it. I'm just demonstrating it now. How the VRAM usage can affect your gameplay, and if it directly causes texture swapping stutter. And I'm running 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, not 8. I'm running 2x8 gig at 3000 megahertz C16. Pretty standard. Nothing over the top. Not like super overclocked or anything. And my GPU is running at stock, just to avoid people saying that it's an overclocking whatever stutter issue, which is not. If I can get a match. But you can already see here the estimate is not accurate. 3.7 gig with these settings, and I'm at 5.6 gig. So either the game didn't clear it properly, clear the VRAM when I adjusted the settings higher, or it's just using a lot of memory. So this will overwhelm most 4 gig RAM cards, these settings, just even at low. It's already too much. But we'll get into a match and you'll see it climb. I don't know if it'll break up to the same stutter level at that I was getting at ultra wide because the resolution's a little bit lower. But I've actually, that was with most settings turned down. I've turned just shadows up a little bit and the shadow caching. And if the stutter starts, it might lag my audio, but you'll see it happen, and it's a classic periodic stutter that happens with high VRAM usage and the RX 5700 cards, or at least my RX 5700 card. But I've seen other people saying they're getting stutter and stuff too. And you can see that stutter there when it's loading, like it just does the parachute drop. Those frame spikes are what the periodic stutter looks like. So if you, but if you, this is the thing, most people that play don't use overlay, and they can't see their VRAM usage. And the game doesn't, it's only got an option to turn your GPU time on, which if you don't want to install an OSD, you can check for stutter using GPU time. You'll have a time under like 10 ms, and it'll spike up to like 40 or 50 ms, and that's stutter. Which is basically what this frame time graph is here. This 11 or 10 ms is the GPU time, frame time. So stutter spikes the frame time. And loading will obviously spike your frame time. Changing between scenes that are running at different FPS rates. So you can see the frame times changing there. But it's not bad as dropping with the parachute, because that's a full scene change where it goes really black. So you can see a little bit of stutter there, but you know that's normal. But you can see here at 1440p, we're already using 7.3 gig of VRAM. And there was a stutter just then. And we're pushing 7.4. Normally I get the stutter around 7.4 to 7.5 gig. It'll start off like subtle, but you'll see like every 5 seconds or so, you'll see a spike in the frame latency in the top right. And the GPU time will spike. The frame latency is the GPU time. So it doesn't always happen for me when I'm running. What is this guy saying? But you can see here, estimate 3.8 gig, used 7.3 gig, and it's another 2 gig higher on my system memory that was down at. It's actually at 10 gig when I start playing, and it's going up to 13 gig. So what else could it be caching? It's just caching game files. So we'll turn settings up to high, because most people, let's say if you've got a 5700 XT, so this is aimed at more the higher VRAM capable cards. We won't turn SSR on because a lot of people know that that's a performance hog. No motion blur. Just high settings, you know. Someone wants to run their game and make it look really pretty. And as it loads more files, which it'll do as I play, you'll start to see stutter appearing, because the VRAM usage will... Sometimes it doesn't even appear in the OSD, like you can't see it's using lots until a little bit. Oh, my aim is horrible. And spacebar didn't work. Nice. And another thing is your VRAM, the usage seems to go up based on how long you've been playing and how much of the map you've traversed. So I don't know how it's loading files. Like obviously it doesn't load all the textures from this side of the map if you're playing over here. But what I do know, or I guess, is that as you go across the map and it loads more, it does not empty out the old textures from one part of the map to the next. So it won't empty this part out because you've traveled here. It keeps this part, and then the VRAM usage just slowly gets higher and higher over like 2 or 3 maps, 2 or 3 games, or even in a single game. If you travel around the whole map and go everywhere, there's some texture files that don't get emptied out. So I'm just trying to die here so I can drop somewhere and travel further away. But you can already see frame time spikes that they would be very apparent if you're running a lower VRAM usage card. See that spike there? It's happening more periodically now. It's happening like every, 1, 2. See if it started. It started already. So it's at some point it swapped files that it needed, and it's either double loading files or I don't know the technical detail of what it's trying to do. But it gets to a point where it's trying to swap files constantly, and the VRAM is either it needs like a certain amount for ReLive or whatever spare. If I turn off recording, it still does it, but it tries to load something it can't load. Is what all I can guess. That's the best I can come up with. It's either trying to load something or it's swapping a file out and it still needs it and it loads it back, and then we get this periodic stutter. That'll see that. So I'll just run around here. I'm not even doing anything. 1, 2, 3. Wait, we'll count going the next one. Maybe if I drive this car to load up some new textures. Wait for the next one to appear. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Oh, it's not doing it as I travel more. 14, 15. Oh, 15 seconds, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a little one. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, there we go. 15 seconds apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There it is on 15. Literally, just I'm not even like counting in a strict manner. I'm just counting, However, every 15 seconds, I'm getting a spike with the high VRAM usage that I don't get when I lower the VRAM usage. Like if I lower that VRAM usage down to around 7 gig, which is this won't work anymore though because I have to restart the game to get rid of the stutter. But if I lower this down to normal and then turn literally everything else off, the tessellation, the caching, particle lighting, ambient occlusion. I only like filmic SMAA because it makes the game look really smooth. But if I run the game like that, but see, it's not swapping out the files since changing to normal. It's still using a high amount of VRAM. But normally, yeah, if I restart the game and lower those settings to what I'm using now, it won't stutter, and I can play like at least 2 or 3 matches. Sometimes I still get the stutter though. If I've done a lot of travel across the map, they obviously have to patch it, but you can see it there, those frame time spikes. And that's with an 8 gig VRAM GPU at high VRAM usage and 16 gig RAM. If you're running a weaker system with 4 gig VRAM and 8 gig system RAM, obviously that stutter is going to be faster. It's going to be a lot worse. And yeah, so that's basically a live demonstration, guys, of the stutter you can expect, whether it's normal or not. I think it's normal based on the game's VRAM usage, and it's just, I think maybe they can patch it somehow in the drivers. They can, like, it could be a bug with AMD drivers, but for the most part, the fact that it's happened in 2 games now, it happens in Gears 5 with the Ultra Texture Pack, is kind of an indication that it's that's just how the cards behave, because it's not only Navi GPUs and RX 5000 that experience it. Oh, that was so bad. This guy's gonna kill me now. No, he's not. Really? Why didn't he just run? Yeah, it's people with lower model GPUs and other series of GPUs are experiencing this kind of behavior. And yeah, so hopefully that enlightens some of you guys, and now you know why your game's stuttering. It's because of the VRAM usage and a combination of your total VRAM capacity and your system memory and the file swapping. So yeah, you need to either upgrade your RAM or hope they patch it in a way they could optimize the game to use memory better, or to consolidate crucial files like the way that it's clearing. Like for example, I would rather have the game stutter. Like if it's going to hit max capacity, I would rather have the game stutter going from quarry to lumber halfway through than have it stutter because it's just constantly trying to load a little bit at a time. Like obviously what's happening is it's swapping stuff repeatedly over a 15-second time period, um, which just depends on your total RAM capacity, memory capacity. So they could probably optimize that to better swap files. Like maybe it could swap out a larger amount of files. It could unload quarry or load them down to lower resolution and then load this up. But that would obviously cause more map travel stutter, which people also don't like. In which case, maybe they can just optimize the size of the lower resolutions, because obviously 1080p on low textures shouldn't be using 4 gig if the game's estimate is much lower. If the game's estimate's 1.5 gig, why is it using 4 gig? It's almost like it's trying to load the whole map when you load in instead of just a portion of the map. Maybe they could adjust the low textures to load on a per section basis. Not the high textures, obviously, because if you're running higher settings and you've got a high VRAM GPU, you do want everything loaded because you don't want that map travel stutter that other games have. But on a low-end system, that's a given. Like you've got to make a sacrifice somewhere, and rather than have constant swapping, you could just have a periodic map travel loading like pause, which at least if you're fighting in one area of the map, you're not going to have it while you're fighting there unless you walk to the exact line, like the border between a zone. Like for example, if we split the quarry and the military base, maybe the load would happen between here, so you'd avoid fighting in that area. But it might be preferable to a constant swapping stutter. But we'll see. I don't know if they can even fix it. Like if it's patchable between AMD or the game devs. But it does happen in Gears 5 too, and I had to remove my HD texture pack to eliminate it completely because it was just basically unplayable with 8 gig VRAM at ultra wide. But that's at ultra wide though, so this is pretty unique for a 1080p game to have this kind of RAM usage. That it was hitting over 4 gig and total like over 6 gig of total memory. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and yeah, hope you enjoyed that explanation, and see you in the next video.